and then we can. Perfect.
Thanks. And if you're not aware, we're making the recording just so it's available for anybody who couldn't join us today, or if you do want to get up to speed another time as well. We will have an opportunity to also just hear each other out as well and introduce each other. But I thought we'll just get started and I'll tell you a little bit more about the pack. So fantastic. I'm just going to share the screen. If you could enable me to do that, Alice, that'd be fab.
Okay. Can you do it now? It should.
Fantastic. Lovely. And I'll just make that full screen. Can everybody see that all right? I've got a nod from Myra and a nod from Colm, so I know that I'm onto a winner there. But yes, thank you so much for coming. I just saw a comment in the chat about how inspiring it was to see so many people. And I have to say, we've just been absolutely blown away by the response for this. I think it's just, I guess, a real nod that we're going in the right direction and that our inklings are correct, that there are so many people who want to help. They want to get interested in policy, but it's just not really knowing where to start and how to enable people best. So extremely inspiring to see. But yes, you're joining us today for our National Dementia Strategy Engagement Pack launch, which is a bit of a mouthful. We've been calling it NDS. My name is Maxine Megan, and I'm an Influencing and Engagement Officer, which really just means that I'm a bit of a people person. I get to go around Scotland, I get to chat to people online, and you just meet the most interesting people and hear the most interesting stories, which is what part of this resource will really be about too. You're joining us on Thursday, the 13th of October, 2022. So as I said, there was certainly some friends, old and new, joining us today. So maybe a little bit of background about who About Dementia is. So we were established in 2019 as Age Scotland's Policy and Practice Forum for Dementia. We were initially funded as a 5-year project by Life Changes Trust. And we've been named as a legacy partner by Life Changes Trust, and that'll support the continuation of our project. We address gaps in policy, practice and implementation, and we centre the lived experience of people living with dementia and unpaid carers. And it's really lovely to see a few of our core members on the phone call today, supporting us and being our cheerleaders, which we really appreciate. So how do we work? As we've mentioned, we speak directly to people with lived experience of dementia, and that includes both people living with dementia and current or former unpaid carers and supporters. They are just as part of the puzzle as anybody else, and we know that dementia can affect the entire family. So that includes unpaid carers, supporters and friends. We do this because we believe that the people who face the challenges are also the best placed to discuss the solutions. You know, you've been there, you are the expert after all. We hold online meetings and face-to-face discussions across all areas of Scotland, and we're really trying as hard as we can on our engagement tour to get into every corner, but we'll come to that later. We also engage via surveys, social media and partnership events, but we try to do things in a slightly different way. You know, when we say policy and practice forum, a lot of people say, oh, I don't know anything about that, or that maybe doesn't affect me. But actually policy does affect everybody, but it's maybe just the language that we use to get people involved and to realise that they can make a difference too. You'll see here are some kind of screen caps from some of our events that we've had. The top one was a jigsaw that we designed that people could write on their experiences of the day, or experiences for one event of self-directed support. So it's just something a little bit different to get people engaged. The same as below, you'll see our voting paddles. I think the question that we asked there was, does everybody want a big slice of cake? Which you can see why everybody was so enthusiastic about that. So we develop solutions and we take action. We do this by creating campaigns together to influence change, and we're guided by our members. So we reply to consultations and we try to communicate the shared voices of everyone affected by dementia. We deliver workshops and presentations to raise awareness of issues and those developments. And you'll see here was our regular human rights group, of which I've already seen a few of our contributors today. And we were taking human rights action against the most recent attempt to I guess, rewrite our Bill of Rights. We have a few regular working groups. They are human rights of unpaid carers, human rights of people living with dementia, and a policy drop-in. We've been running those for several years now. Alice has been leading up the human rights of unpaid carers, and I've been...
Sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
Oh, sorry. We've been running a few regular working groups for quite a while now. So that's for around about 2 years. What I'll do is I'll just pop my headset on so people can hear me a little bit better. And perhaps Alice can tell you just a little bit about the 2 lived experience groups that we've been running.
Yeah, so our lived experience groups have been running for a while now. They meet once a month. So I meet the unpaid carers group at the start of the month, and generally Maxine's groups at the end of the month. And we cover lots of different things. We've covered people feeling what they feel about maybe housing or support with care. I know that the people living with dementia group were focusing on creating stories about their own experiences and how their rights have been impacted, which was a really amazing piece of work, which has actually played into how we've created such a good resource today. And the policy drop-in is a mix of different people coming in, speakers, but also obviously we focus on things like this, like we've did the National Care Service, and now we'll be focusing on the new dementia strategy. So that's it.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Fab, is that a wee bit stronger?
Better.
Better. Fab. Thanks for that. Thanks for being patient with me. As I always say, just because there's a presentation up, it doesn't mean that you can't ask questions as well, or certainly let me know if you can't hear me too well. I'd much prefer that, so thanks for that. So some of our most recent work has included engaging with members to respond to National Care Service consultations, campaigning against proposals to replace our current Human Rights Act, writing to care home managers to encourage the voting rights of people living with dementia, and working with a group of people with lived experience to develop a new grant programme to enable dementia-friendly communities. And there's a lot of learning as well that's gone into the resource and the pack from that grant programme experience as well. And raising awareness of an aspirational use of self-directed support for dementia care. We are also a funder, and I raise this to your attention because we'll have some new funds opening soon, and I know that there's a lot of community groups who may be interested. So Life Changes Trust appointed Age Scotland's About Dementia project as legacy partners. So we'll be delivering a small grants programme and also a peer-to-peer grants programme that'll be coming up soon. We're also part of a £1 million partnership with the Scottish Government, and we're tasked with advancing community support in Scotland. This is via a meeting centre network, Dementia Friendly Communities network of learning in practice, and you may have saw Colm, who's here on the call somewhere, and he is our new Dementia Friendly Community Development Officer, which again, we love these big mouthful job titles, don't we? You'll just need to call us by our first names. And an Empowering Dementia Friendly Communities grant. We've also been involved in the co-production of grants to seed fund new and emerging dementia-friendly communities, including meeting centres. And I know that meeting centres may not be familiar to everybody on the call. They're fairly new in Scotland. It's quite a novel approach. Myself and Alice have had the pleasure of visiting 2 meeting centres even just in the past month, and they really are doing something different in Scotland. It's quite different from, say, a day centre, because the people who go there, it's pretty much split that the people who go there decide the activities that are happening. People who are unpaid carers or supporters can go along too, either with somebody or independently, and it's a real hotbed for peer support and enablement. So there are some upcoming policy developments. There's an ongoing National Care Service consultation, but also the development of a new National Dementia Strategy. And I know that Kevin Stewart is very involved in this and wanting to really propel the voices of lived experience. So a bit of the Scottish policy context before we go any further. We know that dementia was identified by the Scottish Government as a priority since 2007. And we hear this a lot in Scotland, that we have really one of the first countries to introduce different types of policy. We are world leading in that. So we were one of the first countries to introduce a dementia strategy for government. Now, we also know that there is an implementation gap. We can have policy, it can be there, but it's not always followed. And maybe somewhere down the line, there is a missing link. And that is part of what we, I guess, want to look into as well with our own engagement. Is the policy that's out there reflecting people's lived experience? And if not, what can be done to change that? They introduced a right to 1 year of post-diagnostic support and focused on improving skills in the health and care social workforce. About integrated support as well, again, we know that it's not always joined up, and there has been attempts to improve that, and also increase the rates of diagnosis. So that means getting people diagnosed early enough that there can be interventions too. We know that if people stay social, especially in those early stages, that can be maintained a wee bit more. And access to treatment and support, reducing psychoactive medication. And I know that we've got Rebecca, who's on the call today from Playlists for Life, who also, they're a great proponent at personalised playlists at the right time to really reduce the need for medication where perhaps somebody is feeling a bit anxious or agitated. And supporting biomedical dementia research, so emphasising community-based care, post-diagnostic support, human rights and carers. So we've had a few dementia strategies. There was 2013 to 2016 that built on aspirations of the first strategy and really looked into Alzheimer's Scotland delivering localised link workers. There was Dementia Strategy 3 in 2017 to 2020, which introduced the 5 pillars model for post-diagnostic support and the 8 pillars model for integrated care. So again, we know there's been a lot of attempts to really revolutionise dementia care in Scotland, but is it reaching on the ground? And if not, what solutions do we have? So there are some challenges with the approaches. The later strategies have diluted the emphasis on human rights and unpaid carers. There was no commitments for carers in strategy 3, and I know that all of the unpaid carers and former and current supporters on the call today would like to see that be improved. And it doesn't recognise community-based provision that is funded outside of the strategy. So things like dementia-friendly communities, meeting centres, even things like singing groups, which we know add a lot of value, but might not be, seen as traditional care models, but are, again, places for peer support. And there's been no independent evaluation of the approach and its impacts. So this has really led to where we are now. There has been, in February 2020, there was consultation about a Dementia Strategy 4. And we had concerns alongside Life Changes Trust and Scottish Care over the time frame and the lack of plans for direct engagement with people with lived experience. Then the pandemic hit, and I don't think that'll be a surprise to anybody who's on the call today. And we know just what a vastly different world it is now as opposed to pre-pandemic. It's not that the problems weren't there before, they probably certainly were, but it's really exacerbated those people who were already struggling, those community groups that were already struggling to achieve funding are, arguably worse off now. And in October 2020, Derek Feely announced, as well as a consultation, a COVID-19 dementia action plan. So there was a section on community-based approaches, but little detail. And anybody who, is from a community-based approach or takes part in one, you'll know that funding is an issue. And with a lack of funding becomes a lack of uncertainty too. And about dementia support lived experience engagement in this and other work by the new Dementia Policy Unit. So we like to work proactively and constructively. So Life Changes Trust published evaluations on dementia-friendly communities and other work, demonstrating the impact of dementia-friendly communities on post-diagnostic support. Age Scotland and About Dementia were named as legacy partners with Life Changes Trust, and we joined the partnership in January 2022 of Age Scotland About Dementia and the Scottish Government Empowering Dementia-Friendly Communities Partnership. Again, another mouthful. I hope we've all got a glass of water today for these tongue twisters. And Life Changes Trust closed at the end of March 2022. So why is this new strategy important? It is a real opportunity to influence change. It's the first one in a few years, and it's a listening ear, and it shows an openness to the voices of people with lived experience. There's people with lived experience directly involved in the governance. There's a lived experience panel that's been developed by the Scottish Government too, that I know a few regular faces are involved in. And there's an openness to community-based approaches and the value that they bring. Again, that goes without saying for anybody who's ever been part of one. It does link to the National Care Service too, and is a direct chance to influence it.
Maxine, there's a wee thing in the corner of your screen.
Yeah, I have noticed that. I was just about to say that.
Just click the X and see. Oh,
There
there
you go.
Just ignore it.
I'm on a timer. It's gonna, if it runs out, my whole screen's gonna go off like Mission Impossible. So why is it important? Well, it's not a done deal. There is less money than there ever was before. And we know the value of the approach that you all take in all of the work that you do, whether you consider it, work or not, and whether it's just something that you're part of, and whether you're part of your community, it does make a difference. And this is a chance for your members or the people you support or you yourself to directly speak to those making change. And we need to show a united front, I think, as well. Again, we really come from a social model of disability, and really understand the value of community-led approaches and the value of people living with dementia and unpaid carers having their own agency and having their own say. So what are we doing about it? Well, since 2019, we've been engaging with people living with dementia, unpaid carers and professionals on a range of policy areas. This has included transport, technology, human rights and housing. But we've identified areas which we feel we need to engage on a little bit more, and topics which we feel will be instrumental in developing the next National Dementia Strategy. So throughout October and November, the About Dementia team will be touring Scotland. We'll hear directly from small grassroots groups on the ground about the issues that they are facing. We've already visited Kirriemuir, Eastern Bartonshire and Prestwick, and had a really lovely time as well. But we do have other visits booked, so we'll also be heading to Peebles, Fife, Argyll and Bute, Edinburgh, Stirling, Dunblane, Aberdeen, and we are still securing a few more visits. When I do get to the bottom of my email pile, I'm sure that we will get a few more dates in the diary. But we're a small team, and we know we can't reach everywhere within the time given. So we thought we'd turn to the experts. You know the person or group that you support or interact with better than anyone, and we want to ensure that you help us to ensure that their voice is heard. This is particularly important for me. If you don't know me, I worked in a dementia day centre for 4.5 years as a senior support worker before I came to this role. Actually, I remember in my first interview, I was asked, well, how could we better enable people with lived experience to become involved in policy? And I remember reflecting and thinking, well, in my entire 4.5 years of supporting upwards of 200 people, I was never asked once to, ask somebody about policy, to involve someone on that, to accompany them to, a consultation or to Parliament. Yet the people that I interacted with, in a lot of ways, I could, if somebody had word finding difficulty, I kind of knew what they were trying to say. If somebody had a point to make, I could say, oh, such and such wants to speak. And I kind of knew the approaches that worked, but yet we were never consulted and we were never asked. So I feel like it's a real missing link in policy. So we've been visiting friends across Scotland, and we've been creating, trying and testing our workshop plans. From this, we've created an engagement pack. The pack will encourage discussion around care, community support, isolation, complaints, human rights and post-diagnostic support. It will lead you step by step to prepare, deliver and feedback from themed sessions. When I say feedback, we have tried to make as light an approach as possible. Again, going back to my years working in the day centre, if somebody said, and can you come and chat for a video call for about an hour afterwards at the time, I would have been like, no, I don't have time. We barely have time to go through our own kind of care plans. So really we've wanted to make it as intuitive as possible. Each session plan uses a mix of fun, interactive games with storytelling to open discussion. It is quite lengthy, so don't be alarmed when you receive the pack. It's really just to properly prepare you. We wanted people who had little experience of facilitation to be able to pick up the pack and feel confident to really get going. So we've tried to think of everything, but the session plans themselves aren't too lengthy, but it's just the other side of FAQs and so on that you might just find a little bit of a troubleshooting guide. So each session will follow a similar format. And again, I use the word facilitator, and I don't mean that in an off-putting way. You know, if you're already a group leader, if you're already interacting with people, supporting a neighbour, really just enabling somebody to have their voice heard, perhaps a partner in consultations, you know, medical appointments or so on, you're already facilitating conversation. You're just not calling it that. And a lot of the things that we're going to do here, you're already doing. So a cup of conversation starter, it's just a gentle icebreaker which touches on the session theme. Overall, as you go through the entire session, you're hoping that the momentum will build and that you'll really immerse someone in that theme. It means people who perhaps take a little bit longer processing time-wise, they might still be thinking about the first question but able to interact a little bit later in the session because it'll still be relevant. So you'll start with a cup of conversation, and then you'll have a prompt to play one song related to the theme. We do have a list of recommended songs for you to choose from alongside the year that they were released. We know from working alongside Playlists for Life that it's often the memory bump, the period from 10 years old to 30 years old that hold the strongest memories. We'll also be making a playlist as well, so all the songs will be on there for you to choose. You'll have a choice of warm-up activity with 2 different choices each session. There'll also be a few pointers on who it might work best with, for example, an individual or a group. To keep the sessions manageable and within time, we would recommend just sticking to one warm-up, but there's no reason you can't try them out at another time. You'll then receive a letter from a fictional character. Now, all of the stories and the experiences that we're based on came from our discussions and some of them from our own human rights groups. But it'll use a storytelling one-step removed approach in which the person or the group that you support will be asked almost as agony aunts and uncles to give their expert advice. There'll then be a postcard prompt, so an opportunity to offer any last words of wisdom for the character. This will be a template that's provided that you can print off, and you'll also see a photograph of the character. We found this has been really useful in keeping focus too. We're then asking for a song for change. So we're asking for the group or the person to mark their contribution in taking part. It doesn't need to be of a specific theme, it's just a song that they felt. For example, we were in Prestwick yesterday and somebody chose a song because they said it made them feel empowered. It doesn't have to do with change necessarily, but it's how it makes that person feel, and we'll then be compiling a playlist full of the songs. So the sessions there's 2 sessions. They are on community support and caring complaints, but they will touch on other parts, and certainly we've delivered the same session in different places and it's raised completely different issues such as finance, post-diagnostic support. So session 1 is community support, and you'll receive a letter from Neil, and Neil is worried about his neighbour Jock. He's became more isolated since he was diagnosed with dementia, and Neil is looking for advice on how to make his community more dementia friendly. You'll then hear from Stella in session 2, and Stella's had an upsetting experience because her care plan wasn't followed and she's not sure what to do. It may be that you want to run both sessions with the group or individual you support. You may try one and decide, actually, I would rather try the other. Or you may just pick one. There's no need to do both of them. They're not related. You can do them in any order. You can only do one if you'd prefer. So the feedback process, you'll record as you go as much as possible. You will be asked if you have a smartphone for the session to take photos, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can't take part, and there's more details on that in the FAQ. So you'll be prompted to write down feedback from the group. This could be on a big sheet of paper, it could be on a whiteboard, a flip chart, and the good thing is this will also serve as a visual focus to keep track, but it is important when you move on to the next question just to wipe or go to a new page. So during each session, you'll be guided to take photos of the feedback you're noting. You don't need to take photos of the people in the group. You don't need to take down names, last names, first names, anything like that. It's just about the feedback from the group. So we're less focused on the individual, and we'd want to protect their privacy. You'll also be given a note sheet as part of the pack. So, you know, we talk about group, but also if you are somebody who lives at home with somebody and you want to try this out, there's nothing stopping you. All of the activities should be able to be one-on-one as well. Or even if you're a group leader who perhaps supports 4 or 5 people, you should be able to feedback kind of at the moment and a little tiny bit afterwards. So there's nothing stopping you. But if you do have an assistant or a helper who can help you, it probably will take a little bit pressure off you as a facilitator. So I think I've talked enough. So why don't we just give the pack a spin? I'm going to stop sharing the screen now, and we'll start off just with using one of the warm-up activities, which is a community blether wheel. And then we'll go on to Neil and Jock's story. So I'll stop sharing the screen. Oh,
That's all right. I've done it for you, so don't you worry about that.
Oh, fab. I was very confused there. So I'll just bring up our next part. And I'm just trying to see how many people we have on the call now.
We have 41 people now on the call.
So we may split into groups, if that's all right, a bit of breakout groups. And I might ask Alice if she's okay to take that on. What we'll do is we'll start off with the blether wheel, and then we'll split into groups to hear, to give some feedback about Neil's letter, if that's all right. So I'll just start sharing the screen. Okay, can everybody hear, see that okay? Fab, I'm getting a big thumbs up from Colm again. Colm, you just keep me right today. So do we have, I use the word volunteer very liberally, but do we have a volunteer from the call today who'd like to go first on our blether wheel? Just feel free to unmute yourself. Oh, I'm seeing Alex. On you go, Alex. So what's your name and where'd you come from?
Oh, it sounds a bit Cilla Black, that. I'm Alex McEwen. I'm the creative director of Albatross Arts, and I come from East Lothian, but I live in Rue in Argyll.
Nice.
Fantastic. Nice to meet you, Alex. And I should also mention that as part of this resource, you know, this what's your name, where'd you come from, and playfulness, it is such a core part of it. Like, we're here to have fun, and, you know, you'll sell it to people more if you're enthusiastic about it. So let's spin the wheel, Alex, see if you're feeling lucky.
Okay. Oh.
Okay, complete the sentence. If I was lost, I'd turn to.
If I was lost, I'd turn to the
left.
The left. Google Maps.
Oh, you've taken that quite literally. Okay, I like that.
Well, I didn't know which way to take it. I thought, oh, dilemma. If I was lost, I'd turn to a friend, I think. A good friend, a close friend.
Fantastic. And you know, your first answer with Google as well is what we say in engagement is there's no right or wrong answer. It's just interesting. And as somebody who's engaging, you can feel free to probe that a little bit further. You know, if I was having a conversation, I might have picked up on your Google Maps comment and think, oh, why is that? Do you feel like you get lost often? Do you find map reading hard? You know, like those would have been really interesting questions to maybe follow up with. So thanks for taking part, Alex. Certainly food for thought. So do we have another volunteer, or do I just
Maxine,
start?
can I add to that, if I may?
Yes, of course. I'm not
And
sure who's speaking, but on you go.
Sorry, sorry, I'm so rude. I do apologise. It's Alistair McKillop, and the reason I'm wanting to join us just this little bit is one of the ladies that come to our Dementia Friendly Pentlands Club. She was concerned if she got lost. So what we agreed to do was that she put my personal number on her mobile phone. So she now, and she's got a big sign on her phone, if lost, phone Alistair. So you know, for dementia, she knows if I'm lost, I don't have to worry. I phone Alistair and he'll find me. And that gave her a bit of comfort, I think. So it's interesting the way you were talking about that, Maxine, how you can sort of change these things, because obviously she can't, you know, with dementia, she can't really read phones per se, the screens, but certainly that's how she's going to use her phone now. If I'm lost, phone. So I just wanted to add that because it was something that happened very recently.
And it's a very good point. Yesterday, I mean, Maxine probably wants to say it, but I'll jump in as well. So the story about Jock is that he's isolated in his house, and one of the members said, well, you know, Jock might feel like he can't leave his house because he'll get lost, and he's worried that he'll get lost. And then this member said, I feel like that sometimes, but I've now set up a support network so that I can leave my house. So like that's the way that the storytelling is so great, because people do bring part of themselves to it, even though they're talking about somebody completely different.
And yeah, just to echo that, you know, it might seem like we're just playing a fun game, and in a lot of ways I've went back to almost my previous role as an activity coordinator, because I know that when we'd have these discussion groups, it could be something like Edinburgh Old and New, and suddenly it's opened up all these conversations, you know, oh, this is what House of Frasers looked like then. Well, actually I've not been into town in, you know, 10 years. Oh, why is that? Oh, the buses are a nightmare. I can't get about anymore. I don't really feel like going back into the community, and I feel quite sad about that. So actually, we never ask somebody how they feel about community and what the transport situation is like locally, but we've came to that anyway. And I'm sure that everybody here, I can see nods, has had those conversations where you think, geez, oh, if you know, like this is, people are telling you their thoughts and preferences. They're just not telling you them when you prompt in a more of a formal way. So really this is just to open those conversations. So I'm going to pick another volunteer. I don't know if there's anybody, again, I use the term very loosely, who'd like to jump on. Just feel free to unmute yourself and say hello.
Maxine, are you able to close the advert on the screen at all?
I don't think I can, unfortunately.
Oh, well. That's fine.
As long as it's not a rude one. No, that's fine.
No.
I'll happily go second, Maxine.
Okay, what's
Alistair,
your name? Where'd you come
sorry.
from? Oh, Alistair
On
again.
dementia.
You're hogging the mic today,
I
Alistair.
know, what can I tell you? Dementia. I mean, get the pain over quickly. That's what I feel like.
Yeah, exactly. Get it out of the way.
So
well,
from,
let's give it a spin.
Dementia Friendly Pentlands, and the Meeting Place Cafe is who I'm representing today.
Fantastic. Well, nice to meet you, Alistair, and I
You
look
too,
forward to you engaging and hearing the feedback from that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to
I
spin.
apologise for being a bit late. It's totally my fault, so I do apologise.
That's all right. You'll need to apologise on my behalf as well then. So I'll give it a spin, Alistair. And let's see what we get. Okay. So discuss friends or the family you choose.
I like that actually. That again, very relevant. My colleague Pauline and I were talking about this very thing this morning. That our group, whilst they weren't, when we first started it, didn't see themselves as a family, but now they support each other. They meet in each other's houses, and they look after each other in many, many, many ways. And it's a joy to see that they have created a second family, especially as some of them sadly no longer have a family. You know, that they're quite aged, some of them. So they have certainly created this lovely, lovely, and I think Audrey Anderson's on this call as well, who's one of my colleagues, and there's this wonderful family vibe now that we have in the cafe that we run. So I think that is a very apt and relevant saying, that friends are the family that you choose, and certainly it improves the lives of those living with dementia. They've created their own little support network, which is lovely to see. And at the end of our cafe, you see them all having their diaries out and saying, well, I can come to your house in this, and you can come to my house, and somebody's going to bake. And it just, you can see the excitement that they're actually going to be doing something. And again, talking, if we go right back to the first question, they make sure they know where they're going. And if they don't, one of the ladies say, well, I'll pick you up if she can drive. And it's just, you know, it's great. It just means you can be hands off. And it's just, you know, it's great. So I really like that. And I think it's very apt, especially with dementia, that you need more than one family. Really, you know, you need your family, but I think you need a family of friends who you can just talk to without any pressure. So and that's really all I want to say about that.
I think that's, you know, that really exemplifies, I think, what community support means to people, and certainly even our experience yesterday in Prestwick. And I mean, our experience is part of About Dementia so far. We hear so often that friends have maybe walked away from people. They've maybe not known how to cope with the condition, or they've perceived it as a certain way. And I think almost the double-edged sword about perhaps going to groups and thinking, you know, okay, I'll be part of a peer support group. It can be quite daunting to take part in that. It can be quite a kind of big thing and quite anxiety inducing to go along. But really, people become family and actually form friendships after diagnosis, which, you know, isn't a narrative that we hear often, but is certainly something that we see every day in our work with About Dementia, and I'm sure you all do too. And, you know, with the blether wheel, you can do it in different ways too. I will say that in the pack, we've got all the questions just written out, so that you can either just print the page or write them out yourself and do questions out of a hat. So again, going back to my experience in my day centre, we worked out of one room. We weren't very, you know, well funded or so on. We didn't have all the singing and dancing technology. So really, with the engagement pack, there are ways you can jazz it up, and there are ways you can strip it down. So what I'm going to do this time, just to make it a little bit different, is I'm going to spin the blether wheel, and if the question appeals to anybody and they want to join in, then again, just unmute yourself and I will do my Cilla Black impression again. So true or false, I'd rather go to a museum than watch a tennis match. Is there anybody that particularly stands out to?
My name's Steve McCulloch, and I'm from Hanover, Scotland. And
Hi, Stephen.
I would much, my own preference is I would much rather go to a tennis match, and on the basis that it gets me outdoors, and gets me out and about, which is what I like to do, and I'm looking forward to being able to do that for as long as I possibly can. So for me, that's going to tennis matches is good, and just to watch the skills level of people, especially the high level, is fantastic.
I'd like to say I agree with you, Stephen, but I have no concept of any of the rules of tennis. For me, it's just the ball going back and back again, and I'm hearing love and all these terms that I have no clue what they mean, so it would be completely lost on me. So I will respectfully disagree, and I shall go to a museum. But you know, this can open really interesting conversations. I know that a lot of these parts might seem abstract, some of them might seem more on the nose, you know, what is community to you? But this can open conversations. You know, yesterday we were asking if people had ever been part of a club, a drama club, a book club, or so on. And people were saying, yep, I was part of this. And I was asking, oh, do you go anymore? You know, it's okay to play a little bit naive and not go in with all of that. And people will tell you, no, I don't go anymore for these reasons. And I asked, you know, how that made people feel. Would you still feel like a reader if you didn't go to the book club? Would you still feel like a sportsman if you didn't go to your running club? Do you lose your identity when you lose parts of those clubs? So there's ways, again, you can scratch the surface and delve a little bit deeper. I'm going to go to Sandra. You've got your hand up.
Hi there, I'm Sandra. I work within the care sector within a nursing home. Just recently completed the ambassador course for dementia learning within the nursing home as well, which I really enjoyed. For me, I think tennis match, without a doubt, I would go to a tennis match. But I think for, say, some of our residents, some of our care people, they would pick a museum because they can totally relate to things in a museum, because that takes them back to an era that they belong to.
And you know, the interesting thing is, if you obviously we are here, and the engagement pack has been designed to start conversations that may relate to the new National Dementia Strategy. But what my aim is that people will get to know the people that they support or interact with a little bit better. And you might find that there's somebody who absolutely loved tennis and would love to watch tennis more. You know, there might just be little nuggets of information that help you bond too. So thank you for coming along, Sandra, and you know, as I said, yous are the experts, and it's just, I think somebody said it at the start of the call, not only inspiring to see so many people, but to see the diverse range of people who go, yeah, I could enable people, I'm doing it already, but just nobody's asked me.
I think personally, working in the care sector, we feel kind of like the forgotten people within the care homes, to be totally honest with you. It's very much a kind of last place for people with dementia, and it shouldn't be that way. It's all about living well with dementia, with that little bit extra support from us. That's what our goals are.
Fantastic. And I think with that passion and bringing that to the care home that you're part of, I'm so excited to see what comes out of it. But it's just under me the time. We're basically halfway through our session. So as much as I'd love to sit here and talk about my lack of tennis knowledge all day, I'd probably just embarrass myself more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and then I'm going to move on to our next activity, which is part of the pack, which will be a letter from Neil and from Jock. So bear with me just a few ticks, and I will bring up a lovely photo of Neil and Jock for everyone to look at. Okie dokie. So, can everybody see that okay? You've got Neil and Jock. Fantastic. And is that still full screen for everyone?
Yeah. Just now it's not.
Well, what I'll do is I'll get rid of it, and we'll do things the old-fashioned way. This is what you get with technology and trying to show off. So I will get Neil's letter, and I think the really interesting part about doing this as a group, and as I've said it before, is really how you sell it to everybody. When we've ran the engagement sessions, we've, you know, we've printed it out, we've put it in an envelope, we've made a real show of opening the letter to everybody. I've even wrote on the front, it said yesterday it was to the Prestwick Boffins. So the more you make this feel like this is special and this is something that people should be excited about, I think the more that'll come across to people too. So I'll just get Neil's letter. And you'll start each session with your related song. So the related song for this was With a Little Help from My Friends by the Beatles. And you can kind of ask as well, what's really calling out to people about that. So our letter from Neil. Hi there, my name's Neil from Newton Moor. I hope you don't mind me getting in touch, but I'm looking for some advice. I've been hearing more and more about these things called dementia-friendly communities. I don't know much about them yet, but they sound fantastic. We don't really have anything up like that in Newton Moor, but I think we need it. You see, we're part of a small, close-knit community. Our village is beautiful and we're surrounded by nature and wildlife. However, Newton Moor is quite rural, so it's not the easiest place to get around if you don't drive. The buses around here are a nightmare. We have a local bowls club, a church, a village hall and a pub. Yet people still find it hard to live here in later life. Take my neighbour Jock. We always used to go hill walking, all the time actually, but he lost his confidence last year when he was diagnosed with dementia. Now he never leaves the house. I'm worried he's becoming a bit of a hermit, and every time I try to coax him out, he says, "Not interested, mate, I'm happy with my own four walls." It's a real shame, because Big Jock used to be so sociable. He was basically part of the furniture at the local pub. I honestly don't think he's coping well, but I can't seem to coax him out of the house. Sadly, many people seem to leave Newton Moor, even people who were born and bred here. I'm not sure why, but then again, I am a young whippersnapper. What, 40 is the new 21? So I have some questions for you. What makes somewhere a great place for older people to live? What kind of community do you want to live in? What small and big changes could we make to make people be less isolated and be more dementia friendly? And how can we prevent people from feeling isolated as they age? Thanks for your time, and any words of wisdom you have would be super helpful. So I'm just going to come to the group. I don't know how everyone's feeling. Would you prefer breakout groups, or do we want to be one big gang today?
I think that's all right. I think
I can see some nods. That means basically people are thinking they might get a chance to slip under the radar with my very loosely way of picking volunteers. So firstly, we always start off with a question about the character, which is just, how do you think they're feeling? So how do we think Jock is feeling? He's been recently diagnosed with dementia. He's becoming a little bit of a hermit, and he just doesn't really want to leave the house anymore. So do we have any thoughts on how Jock might be feeling before we focus on Neil's questions?
I'll go lonely, probably feels lonely even though he says he's fine.
Yeah. And I've got a lady waving down in the corner. I'm
Oh.
not sure of your name, but feel free just to unmute yourself.
Let me see if I can. You're on mute, unfortunately, so I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can unmute you, but
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
There
You're
we
good to
go.
go.
We can hear you loud and clear now.
I'm Ketrin Morrison, and I think he's feeling afraid, and I think probably he didn't have a close friend before this happened, outside of the family, who can comfort him, encourage him to be more like himself, or as he was before.
And that's true, you know, when you're running these sessions, people might come to you and ask, you know, does Jock have any family? And it's okay to say, we don't actually know from the letter. It doesn't mention any family. It's okay for questions to be asked about that. But again, you can stress that you only really know what was in the letter. Alec, you've got your hand up.
Hi, thank you. I think it would be interesting to consider the perspectives of the other people in the village. If you're saying that there's not really much, or there doesn't seem to be any provision or understanding about dementia-friendly communities in Newton Moor, then maybe people aren't as in touch with how people with dementia may be feeling, and there may be a fear amongst other people in the village about how, if they've seen a sudden change in one of their friends, how do you communicate? And that hesitancy and lacking confidence how to communicate with someone as they're changing can quickly become a barrier.
Of course, and just a few comments from the chat as well. I'm seeing isolated, lonely, afraid, dejected, not sure where to turn. Perhaps he's feeling alone. He may actually be happy at home at the moment, though, taking the time to process the recent diagnosis. So it's important to respect that. Perhaps people can come to him if he wants that. And don't forget the stigma of dementia, which sadly exists. Audrey, you've got your hand up. Feel free to just jump in.
Oh, hi. I am a volunteer for a group called The Meeting Place, and basically it's a support group for people with or without dementia. And we have 2 members who sadly have stopped coming, and their families say it's apathy and it's a side effect, it's an effect of dementia. Some of them won't get up till like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. No matter how much you coax them, they just can't be persuaded or convinced to get out of bed, and they just have lack of interest in everything. You know, it's really sad actually, because up until their diagnosis they've been very sociable people. And yeah, they just, you don't know how you can help them get beyond that, you know. Sometimes you think maybe not a stranger, but someone who's not a family member might be the person to help, but it doesn't seem to work that way. You know, it's very difficult.
It is, and thank you for sharing that as well. And I think you'll notice from the comments I've read out in the chat, from the voices that we've heard as part of the call, how we all had a slightly different approach on how Jock felt. Jock might have been feeling apathetic. Jock might have been perfectly fine in his own house and just taking time to process things. So actually what we've heard here, whilst we've been talking about Jock, we're in some ways reflecting on how we feel about the situation. And it's certainly one of the storytelling principles is we're not really looking for the truth. And I know that sounds like a hard concept, and it's something that I've struggled with as well, but we're looking for more how somebody feels. So thoughts, feelings and opinions, which might not always be based on the truth. And I'm going to put on my silly hat now and say, what is the truth anyway, and how does anybody else have more ownership to it than you know, you or I?
Everyone perceives it differently. Absolutely, Maxine. Absolutely.
Of course, and is anything
and we
that
must
I
never
tell you?
assume. We must never assume that we know best. I know that often, I mean, we've in our group again, we find that sometimes the carers or the family, they think that they know best. So no, I'm going to keep telling my dad that he's saying things wrong. No, I'm going to tell him that he's getting lost. I'm going, and you've really got to work. We work from the carer first, really. I know it sounds bizarre, really, but we try to work the other way around. The person living with dementia is usually fairly balanced in that sense, but it's the family who can't cope, who can't accept. And they you know, this, as I said, the stigma of dementia. So it's really like making sure that the person's wishes, because you're still the same person. Just because you've got dementia doesn't mean you're any lesser of a person. You've still got your same rights and you're still ownership. And you see so often, we see, you know, especially when they come at first to our cafes, that they're very passive, they're very placid, because they don't want to make a mistake. They don't want to sound as if they're being stupid. They don't want to embarrass their families. And what Audrey and myself and Pauline do is do what you like here. Nobody cares. You know, it's all about you. Whatever you want to do, you do it. No one's going to pass judgment on you. And I think that's such a hugely important thing. Sorry, my granddaughter's popping in. And you know, Audrey, myself, and Pauline, as I said, we're very passionate about this. That we must allow that person to be that person, because, and as long as possible, I think that's what care in the community and a dementia-friendly place is. Basically, allow that person to be. Don't assume that we know better. Just let that person, make sure it's a safe environment for that person to flourish. And they do. Sorry, I know I'm
And you know,
talking
people
far
might,
too much, but hopefully you know what I'm talking about, Maxine. Okay,
I think
sorry,
everybody
I'll
on
shut
this
up now.
call knows what you're talking about for sure. I'm seeing a lot of that's really resonating with a lot of people. And, you know, isn't it interesting if you were even to do the resource in the pack and somebody said, oh, I don't know anything about that, you probably don't want to hear from me. That says something within it itself, that a person feels like they don't have a voice, that they haven't got anything, you know, valuable to add to that conversation. That is still interesting and it's still worth feeding back. And just to tell you a very short story from my own experience about what is the truth. Well, you know, when I worked in a dementia day centre, a lady came in one day just absolutely in tears. I'd never saw her so upset. And I sat with her and asked, you know, is everything okay? What's happened? And she told me that the night before, 2 cheeky squirrels had got into her house, 2 cheeky little animals, and they'd stolen her false teeth. And she was crying because they wouldn't give them back. And she was so upset. And you know what? The part of you initially wants to say, oh, that's not true, or you know, you maybe sit with that hat and think that can't be true, and you could dismiss it. But I did phone her daughter to say, your mum's here today. She's really upset. Has anything happened at home? And she told me, oh, well, actually, she had 2 new male carers in last night. I don't think she liked them very much, and they misplaced her teeth. So there was truth in that story. There was a root of it. And actually, when you look at the 2 stories, they are the same themes. She felt isolated. She felt like there was strangers in her home making her feel uncomfortable. She felt unkept because she didn't have her false teeth in and she didn't feel prepared for the day. So actually that story about 2 cheeky little squirrels that came in the night told you quite a lot about how that person feels about the support that they get at home. So I would implore you to have an open mind going into this. If somebody says something that you think, oh, that's a bit of an outlier, that maybe doesn't fit with the rest of the group, or I'm not sure why they said that, write it down. It could be that on reflection, when we look at a lot of groups, they might be saying the same thing, or it might be that a week later you think, oh, actually, now that somebody's told me about that story, what they said makes a bit more sense. And also you work with that person, as I said, maybe on a daily basis, you might support somebody on a daily basis. You might have that additional context. So that's why it's really useful that we turn to you. I'm just going to ask a few more questions from the letter, and then we'll go to our own Q&A, so you can ask questions about how we've been running the resource. There is going to be an FAQ as part of the resource as well. So hopefully if there's any questions that weren't asked today, it'll be part of that. So just to move on to our next question, and again, it's thrown out to everybody, but what makes somewhere a great place to live for older people? So this is what Neil is asking, because he's hoping to make his community a bit more dementia friendly.
Alex got his hand up. Do you want to go?
Sure, thank you. I think what you said earlier, Maxine, about, I think it was Maxine, about focusing on the simple things and connecting the dots between potentially different experiences that people or places that people are going to, and working out how can, if someone's feeling isolated or coming across not enjoying things in one group, and how you can change that by linking with another. As an example, there's a lady called Helen who I used to work with. She used to go to a day centre in Aberdeen that supports people with dementia. And I started to work with her as part of an intergenerational singing project. And the only time when she came alive during the session was when she was singing. The rest of the time, everything seemed to have shut down. But I found out that she was living very close to another intergenerational group I was running elsewhere in the city. And because of her mobility issues, even though she lived 5 minutes from where we were, she wasn't able to get there. So before the session each week, I would go and pick her up in my car and take her over. and her singing would come alive again. But then it was really interesting that as the more that she sang and the more she relaxed, the more I started to hear about what her opinion or what her perception of the day centre was. And it goes back to what you were saying, Maxine and Alistair, about not to assume anything. And one of the reasons why she didn't seem to enjoy going to the day centre was because in her mind, the day centre was a dating service, that she was being taken there by a minibus every week to meet, to be introduced to other older men, other
suitors.
Other suitors. And she, her husband had died a few years ago, and she didn't want anyone else. But the more her singing confidence grew in one group, the more she started to come alive at the day centre. So I think the more that different parts of a community speak to each other and build links, and that can create a deeper sense of cohesion, I think.
I think you're completely right, and actually you've picked on, I guess one of the key points of the engagement pack too is the use of music. So starting with a song, often we find is a bit of an icebreaker. It might make it seem more informal too. You know, if I was to come in with a clipboard and a blazer with shoulder pads in, I'm not sure people would want to chat to me. But once we put on a bit of a song and bring a speaker out and let people sing along to that and get involved ourselves, then it just, I think, makes it just seem a bit more normal, a bit more of a chat. I'll bring in James, who's got his card up.
This is the 5th time I've held my card up.
Oh, sorry,
James.
I've been ignored. I can only assume you didn't see me.
No, I didn't see you at all.
Don't you worry.
Sorry, James. I'll ask Alice to keep a wee eye out for that. Sorry about that, James.
The thing is, you ask some questions and I can't remember them. The best thing to do is to email me the questions and I'll respond.
Yeah,
Fab, I will do.
One question. Sorry, too many speaking there.
Creating dementia-friendly communities, James McKillop. 2001.
Wow.
That was an Alzheimer's Scotland conference. Why are we still talking about it 11 years later? You know, there've been lots of good ideas in the past, but they fell by the wayside.
Yeah.
So,
and I think a lot of us would agree with you, James, and that is something that can come across as well. People might say to you, I keep being asked the same question, or nothing's changed in my day, nothing changed before. Again, that's worth noting. It's what we all need to hear. It's to say, why hasn't there been change? And why hasn't there been the type of change that we want? You know, dementia-friendly communities, community support being valued. I'm sure we have people here who've been in their roles or supporting people or living with dementia for 20 years plus. So it's okay for that to be reflected. On you go, James.
I've forgotten some of the things I was going to say, but one thing that struck me, people seem to assume that on the day you get a diagnosis, dementia starts. It starts years before that. And that's when people need support. I've known a few people, the marriages broke up because dementia came in the door and didn't know. My wife nearly left me because of my behaviour. Again, we didn't know what was happening. And a lot of people have lost their jobs. You know, they suddenly couldn't cope, and they were in one way or another pushed out the door. And this is all before diagnosis. So the support should be there. I think you've talked about somebody in the community. If somebody's shown sign of distress, you know, you help them there and then. You don't wait till they get a diagnosis of dementia. So,
and I think that's a really good point, James. You know, that conversation that Neil wrote the letter and said, "Oh, I need to help my neighbour now. He's been diagnosed." You might have said, well, what was stopping you before? He was probably feeling isolated before. And again, that's really good feedback to know, and it's what we need to hear. You'll probably hear sobering things, and in a lot of ways, you know, certainly in the workshops, a couple of times we've been asked, do you use the word dementia? Do you have to use the word dementia? People find it quite upsetting or could be quite triggering. And
it's
what
just
I
a
would
label, Maxine. It's just a label. And can I just say, James, thank you so much for sharing. I think that really brings reality to this conversation. So thank you so much, James, for being so honest with all of us. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
And people, I won't pull people out who are part of our human rights group today, but the stories have been developed kind of alongside the activists that we work with who have experienced those issues. Sometimes it can feel like a stretch, but actually it's what people have experienced. Audrey, on you go. You're just on mute.
Jock's friends could take a few cans of beer round to his house, just knock on his door one night, say, come on, party time. Because I really think that would help him. You know, instead of him going to the pub and not going to the pub, take the pub to him.
And you know, that has never came up before in the engagement. But if that was in the engagement, I'd find it so interesting because, yeah, what's to stop that? You know, people living with dementia don't suddenly stop becoming adults because they live with dementia. They still want to have a tipple and have fun and have a bit of a laugh and occasionally, dare I say, a bit of a dance.
That's right.
Margaret's got her hand up, and then I'm just going to open up a discussion or a Q&A. I realise we're close to, not too close to 4:30, but some people might need to nip off then. Obviously, we'll stay on the call if you have any further questions. Margaret, on you go.
I was just going to mention a DVD called Change Days. I don't know if anybody's seen it or heard of it.
I've not heard of that.
It's a gentleman that lived in Stonehouse in Lanarkshire, who used to do a lot of the bowling, in the bowling greens, etc. And he was a champion for a number of years. And then he got a diagnosis of dementia. As time went on, he got more forgetful. He got frustrated because he couldn't close the buttons in his coat or his shirt, etc. Fell out with his daughter over it because she was trying to help him and he didn't need the help, he said. He went to a local shop. The girl behind the counter was on, she did really well. She was on her mobile and she's chatting away to her friend on the mobile. And then he didn't know what he went to the shop for. And she goes, what is you wanting? She's shouting at him and he didn't know what to say. And then she told her friend on the phone that there's a weirdo in the shop just wandering about. But one of the neighbours came in and said, you need to respect people. This is ridiculous. You don't know what's wrong with this man. This was such and such who was a great bowler, etc. So they managed to get him to walk by the bowling club. His actual grandson got him to walk by the bowling club. And then a few times, and then his curiosity got the better of him, and he ended up going in. And people made a big fuss about him and showed him his, the plaques on the walls with his name on it, etc. And he was back. He felt as if he was back in the community and really needed, and people respected him for what he was. Never mind, not just his, talking about his dementia. They respected him for his background. It's a really good DVD, and it's a community base where you can see the young girl didn't know anything about dementia or very little, and couldn't be bothered, whereas an older person, that was also in the shop was a bit more understanding. So I think a dementia-friendly community, it's vital. It's a vital in place. And somebody already mentioned that Clydesdale. I mean, resources in Clydesdale are very poor. Some of them are very isolated, the villages, and I live in a wee village as well, so it's we have an idea who's got dementia because but still they need a lot more support than just directing them to their house, etc. They need something to occupy them.
The name of the film again, and I'll just pop it in the chat so that if anyone wants to.
It's called Change Days.
Change Days. Changed
Days.
Change Days. Thank you for sharing that, Margaret. Okay. And it sounds like a really lovely story, and I think is really underlined the value that one, you might find out more about people, but equally you don't need to find out that someone was a gold medal swimmer for them to be valuable and for it to be worthwhile spending time with that person. You made me think actually about one of the points, a curiosity. You might work with a group where someone goes, not my cup of tea. And certainly don't force anybody to take part. You know, it might have the opposite effect of thinking I'm not getting involved in that group again, but actually just maybe going, okay, well, you know, you're more than welcome to sit with us and we'll start the session. And you might find that they join in anyway. You might find that somebody maybe doesn't give a lot of feedback during the session, but might write quite a lot in the postcard part. You might find that somebody doesn't really give any feedback, but you have spent, you know, whatever time that is, an hour with that person, with some fun activities, with some stories as well, where that's your time and your care and attention, and that has value as well. You know, I don't want anybody to feel like they're here to find a specific thing, or if they don't come back with a screed of notes, that it's not valuable. It certainly is. And even just being here and recognising that people living with dementia and unpaid carers have a part to play in policy, that is a big step, and that is fairly new as well to be doing it on this scale. So I just...
Sorry, James just raised his card as well.
Oh, James keeps going to the other side of my screen. I can't fit everybody in the one. On you go, James.
So, somebody was speaking a few moments ago. It rang a bell and I went to look for a DVD if I have, and I think it might have been Stonehouse in South Lanarkshire. It was a DVD and there were actors. Now, I can't remember who was talking about it. I don't know if that was the same DVD.
It was me that
It was a lady.
It was me that was speaking about it, James. Yes, it was made in Stonehouse in Lanarkshire, South Lanarkshire. And it was about a man that we used to go to a bowling club. It's not a film, it was just a DVD that was, we used to use it as part of our training when we did training sessions, just to make people aware that, you know, communities could be more friendly towards people with, you know, who are, who've maybe got a bit more confused or early stages of dementia, etc. And we used to use that as a training pack.
Fab. Well, what we'll do our best with any of the resources that people have talked about today to try and find the links to those and include that in our follow-up email, which will be sent tomorrow because we're hoping to send this recording with it so that if there's anybody interested, you can forward the whole thing on, including this recording in the one email. But I want to just open up the floor if you have any questions or any concerns. Obviously, the pack will explain a lot more detail than I ever could in the hour and a half, but any burning questions, do let me know. There's a lady again at the bottom, I've forgotten your name, wearing the glasses. You're just on mute.
No, I still can't hear you.
Just give you 2 ticks. And just to say, I will bring this up in our last kind of closing slides, but we are having a stakeholder meeting on the new National Dementia Strategy. That'll be on November 3rd, and it'll be in Stirling. And again, we'll pop the save the date in there. And I can see Kitron is unmuted herself. On you go, we should be able to hear you now.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Right. I'm sorry. I wasn't charged up for a few minutes and I didn't hear all of the conversation. So someone may have covered this, but when going back to the question about how was Jock feeling, I think one of the biggest things there is in denial. It may well be his wife has said, you need to go and see the doctor, but there's nothing wrong with me.
It could
and
be.
I think that sometimes going to a group at that stage is not of use to him because he disassociates himself with the people who are there who have problems. And I've had this experience with my own husband. He didn't want to go back because he wasn't like those people. And I think that's one of the big things about how people feel when they get a diagnosis. It's too early for them to absorb all of this.
Especially if what is available. You know, we went to a group the other day at a meeting centre. Oh, James is showing us something. Hold it close, James, I'll read it out. Change
there it
days.
is.
Oh, there you go.
That's
James
the
has got
one.
it on DVD already.
If you
So we'll
want
see if
more, just
I think we
ask
saw
James.
a link in the chat, so we'll be sure to distribute that. But when we were at a meeting centre the other day, we told Jock's story, Neil and Jock's story, and somebody said, I mean, it sounds like, you know, Jock's maybe struggling with dementia. I don't know about anybody else here, but I live with dementia and this is how I feel, and started chatting about it. And actually they weren't aware that everybody else who was part of the club on that day, another 15 people in the group they were in, all lived with dementia. Yet, you know, they didn't associate that as a dementia specific group, and it wasn't, it's their meeting centre. But you can imagine, just again, looking at the diversity of community support that's out there, what may appeal to one person might off-put another. So we need to have lots of different resources that people can pick and choose from, whether that is a singing group or a meeting centre or a men's shed. You know, that might appeal differently to different people. I wonder if anybody else has any questions about the resource itself or the pack, the sessions.
Now, the pack looks great. I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Yes, and we'll get that.
When you send it to us.
Fantastic. And as I said, don't be too off-put by the length. I definitely, like a Pringles tub, once I popped, I couldn't stop with sharing knowledge. So I hope that you'll find it useful to draw from in kind of any future work that you do. And equally, let us know any comments or feedback as you go. This is new for us. It's a novel approach. There's no exact science for engaging with people living at various stages of dementia, with unpaid carers and mixed groups. You really are going to be trailblazers when you go out and deliver this. But isn't it just a statement within itself that we're saying we see value in this, we see value in speaking to people? So I'm just so excited for everyone to kind of take part.
I think, Maxine, you brought up a very relevant point though. And it's one that we constantly fight with, is that we are rural, although we're very close to Edinburgh, we're not that close. So our infrastructure, there's very limited access. So we haven't access to all the varied groups that even 1 mile down the road has, because people can't get there. And I think I just wish we could offer more variety and the, you know, actually care within the community and really mean that. And at this moment in time, there is no appetite from Scottish government or the City of Edinburgh Council for us to actually fund anything within the smaller areas. Everything seems to go to the bigger centres, which is fine, but you know they're overloaded with groups and buildings, etc. We, for example, don't have any buildings that we can use. We have to be, we are at the behest of the Scout Hall or the Curry Kirk, or, you know, things like that. So it's very, very difficult sometimes to give that variety, which is much needed. So I think we try to vary the menu, as it were, for our people, but it is difficult. But I guess what we're very proud of is that our group now is, but we Dementia Friendly Pentland, when we started, it was just a dementia cafe. And we never felt comfortable with that, because we were talking about bringing people with dementia into the community, but we were actually putting them in a silo of a dementia-only cafe. So hence we created the meeting place, which is for those living with dementia, but it's also for people 65 and over living in isolation and loneliness. And that has been incredibly successful. So we've got people living with dementia, with Parkinson's, but we've also got people living in isolation and loneliness. And as I said earlier, that lovely family vibe, everyone's looking after each other. So there's no stigma in my club, but there is still that stigma of, oh, you've got dementia, you know, and oh, is it contagious? And it's, I think, as James McKillop was saying, we don't seem to have progressed much in the 10, 12 years I've been working with dementia. And that's very sad. And it's not just funding, as I'm sure you'd agree, Maxine. It's not always about money. It's about support. It's about giving something back. I mean, I bet looking here, there's an umpteen number of people who are unpaid carers, which save the government billions of pounds a year. None of that is ever returned back to us. You know, the carers are they're the wit's end, because there's nowhere to put somebody for respite or for. And it's just, I get so angry about this, which is why I'm on the Integrated Joint Health Board for Edinburgh, to try and improve that. But it's so difficult because dementia is, let's be honest, dementia is not sexy. You know, we're not going to get Elton John doing a concert for somebody with dementia, you know. That's the sort of thing. It's still this stigma.
But it
How we
can
overcome
be,
that, Maxine, I don't know.
you
I'm going
know,
to shut up again. I'm so sorry. I don't mean to hog everything.
no,
I do
it's all right.
apologise.
Thanks for taking part. And, you know, I think the comment we get often, even when the work we do, is that must be so sad, or you know, that's you know, how does that work, or does it even work, actually, engagement? But you know, we've got the two Julies from Prestwick who are on our call today, and we had a right laugh yesterday. We had such an amazing day and just got to know people a little bit better. There were sad moments, there were funny moments, there were moments where I definitely got heckled and ripped, but that's all part of it, you know. And I think two things really that you raised, Alistair. I think the pack itself, it might, you know, when you're speaking to people and you're having these conversations, you might learn more about, one, what people might like, but also the ways that you could actually deliver that. Being person-centered but in a community group setting, is that somebody would be quite happy just listening to music for a bit, or that they would maybe mentor somebody or work with someone doing that. I also want to raise a really important question that was raised in the chat, which is, when do we want the engagement by? Okay, everybody, hold on to your seats. We have put a date of 18th of November. This is because we didn't set the date for when the national conversation will take place with the Scottish Government. That's not within our control. And we think that we're going to have to kind of formulate our response by the early December. So that gives us about a week after we finished our on the ground engagement to basically lock myself and Alice in a room, not wash our hair for a week, and just eat nothing but snacks. And
meals
you
through
know,
under the door and everything like that. Yes.
we wish it was longer, and certainly don't, you know, if you don't manage to get back to us by then, or you continue to run the sessions, we'll still be here as a project. It just might not make it into that part of the national conversation. So yes, just over a month, no pressure, but the sessions themselves should last anywhere between 45 minutes to an hour and a half. It's flexible. You can make them shorter if that's all you've got, and you can stretch them out with breaks in between. But you know, if you were able to run one session, half a session, you get half a paragraph back to us, you get a couple of quotes that people said, it is more than has been ever included before. And of course, we will keep trying. And this is really just the beginning of packs like this, of our engagement like this, of involving people a little bit more and upskilling them and passing on that knowledge. It is really just the beginning, but for this piece of work, I'm afraid it's November 18th, but we will try our best to incorporate whatever we can. But yes, I don't know if anybody has any more questions for us, and certainly feel like once you get the pack, send us some questions as well. On you go, James.
Pardon me. When you're talking to people with dementia, I wrote an article a number of years ago about communicating with people with dementia. I've lost an awful lot of my early stuff, but I think I've still got that, and you would like me to email a copy.
Very much so. I can see a lot of nods in the room. So if you're able to get that to us, James, we'll try and send the pack out as soon as possible, but we can always follow up with James's resource.
And again, remember, I said something earlier about email me after the meeting if you've got time, so I can start working on it, because I forget what it was.
Fantastic, I will do, James. So yes, unless there's any more questions, as I said, save the date, November 3rd. That's our stakeholder meeting in Stirling, and everyone's invited. And yes, we'll try and feed in and check in and see how you're doing as well. But yeah, I can't wait for everyone to get out there and try it. I hope that you bond with people. I hope you find it mutually beneficial. Actually, I was thinking about Alistair's point, and it would be useful context, I think, to actually, if you were able to even just give us a blurb, you know, that whole what's your name and where do you come from. But I think actually to show the diversity in the Scottish dementia landscape, but also the limitations you're working with. You know, it might be rural, you might not have a set building, you might only meet once a month as a group, or you might, like Sandra, perhaps you're in every day, every other day, but you can barely find 10 minutes to have a conversation with somebody. So do what you can. It's flexible. Change it about. It's not an exact science. It's not a research kind of project. If you want to change the name because somebody you work with has the same name, or you want to change an element of the story because you think it'd be confusing, then use your own judgment. You know the people that you support and you interact with the best. So the power is in your hands, really, to influence change.
So, yeah, so if there's nothing else, like, just again, just a huge thank you. I think, like, this shows even just the people we have here, and that's not even half of the people that said, I'm really sorry I can't be here, but I want to join, shows how many people care really passionately about this and how much change we can make and we are making. So yeah, I guess it's just another thank you. And if we do anything like this again, we'd be really grateful if you could come along, spread the word, chat to whoever you can about it, and Maxine and I'll help you out there with anything you need. All right.
Certainly so, and we'll be still traveling about and uploading our stuff to Twitter. Basically, Alice now films me dancing along to the start at every session. It's going to go viral at one point, so if you don't manage to track down her Twitter, I'm sure you will see it somewhere, playing off a teenager's phone whilst they make a meme over it very soon. We've got, is it Kitron again?
No, I didn't say, I was laughing just.
No, no worries at all. But yeah, have fun. You know, like what you're doing, it is policy and practice, but it's what everybody's been doing anyway. You're having these conversations, you're enabling people. We're just not calling it that, and this time we are. So yeah, go out, empower people, have fun, get to know people a little bit better, and any comments and feedback you have would be greatly received. And spread it on, send the email on to people, get them involved as well. Let's just spread this momentum and keep it going so that we become such a united collective that we're much harder to ignore.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Fantastic. Well, I'll see you all soon. The About Dementia email will be in the pack, and you'll hear from us probably within the next day, and we'll send that pack on. And
well,
yes,
you had info about your conference, Maxine. You're saying it was the 3rd, did you say?
The 3rd
of
November.
That, or have you sent
I can send that. I'll send that in.
We certainly will send that on.
In as well. All right.
Yeah,
I think I've probably got an IJB meeting that day, but I'd love to. I'd love to go there rather than IJB. Believe me.
Yeah, we'll probably have better cake. We tend to have good cake.
Or any cake.
You
don't even get tea anymore. You don't get nothing anymore with the council.
Fab. Well, lovely to see you all, and lovely to meet some of you for the first time. And if there's no more questions or anything, then off you go. Empower. I feel like there should be like a klaxon now goes and everybody just starts on the finish line. You have until November 18th. Lovely to see you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. See you soon.